But I think, yeah, I think one of the things is the cat is out of the bag is that all these years of being told you can't, and now you really can, and people are pushing back on everything because of the lack of trust. And I think, and that there's a disparity to Lisa's point earlier that, executives always had the accommodations and everybody else being told no. And when we all went hybrid or remote, then you say, "Oh, so this is possible, except some of you can and some of you can't." It's like the meme with you're walking with the girl that is named you can't, and then the other girl going the other direction has a big butt, so to speak, and he goes, "Ooh." And then I think that's what it is. That they see the peers doing it, and they see other people that are doing it, and yet they're going to leave that one to go to follow the one that says there are exceptions. So I think that's where people are kind of jumping off at, and them kind of letting everything else that they felt about the workplace be known publicly. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. And that's a very natural reaction where we do get to the point of overreactions.
Yeah, I love that. And I was just looking for a stat. You're talking about the idea of people, people have been productive. It's not like it was a few months, but it was 2 years. People were home, they were productive. And one of the things I read in that same report was that 38% of respondents, they wanted to know if they have to go back to the office, when do they have to go and why do they have to go? And not just like, okay, whatever you say, boss, kind of thing. And we're going to talk more about the whole hybrid and
And if I could clarify,
oh, go ahead.
when I said but, I mean that as kind of the preposition conjunction. Yeah. Yeah. I was hoping people would catch on. I know somebody's going to go back and say, "Man, that's what I really meant in a roundabout way."
We're talking with Mark Anthony Dyson, voice of job seekers, about some newer terms that are out in the job seeking world and how they might apply to you in your job search. So, Mark, we were just talking about boomerang employees and people that have left but might be thinking about going back. And now we're going to transition into talking about job phishing. So, job phishing is a term that has come on more recently and kind of applies to something negative. But it's a great topic for people to understand. So, what is job phishing?
Well, people think of job phishing like catfishing, but with jobs. Scammers who actually ultimately want your private data. So what they do, they become much more sophisticated and they become much more savvier these days than let's say about 7 or 8 years ago, where they would prey upon the older people who have been out of a job for a long period of time, and they are able to lure them with money. These particular scammers now are a little bit more sophisticated. They're able to set up a fake company, even online, to even make it look like, let's say, to LinkedIn, which that actually happened where someone set up a fake company under LinkedIn, had a LinkedIn page. Now, there are some signs that we can get into how you can tell if something might be a little fishy, so to speak. But all in all, I think people have to understand that it's very easy these days to set up a scam to have a network of scammers and they to get a certain population or certain types of people to fall into those scams.
Yeah, this is happening more and more. How
Yeah.
does, you know, how do these people scam their victims?
Well, they first convince them that the company is real and that the job is real. Of course, they do that mostly by setting up a job and a company. And it could even be a company that it seems like a real company, but it isn't. It's fake. And they have fake jobs. It could be a company that sets up as a company that already exists, like let's say LinkedIn, that's happened. Or they could set themselves on Microsoft. Because a lot of these companies, large companies have smaller entities, it's not that hard to set it up as a new division, as a new job, and you should apply for it and put it out there where people can see it. Now, they could even put a fake job ad on any of the platforms, and people actually fall for it and they apply for it. So when people go into these situations, they go through the process just like if it was a job interview. It's not that hard to fake it. In some cases, a job interview, they may do it with 2 or 3 people, or they may do one person, and they may even tell the person in that one call that we want to hire you right away. And what's actually happened is that people have gotten job fished so much that or so deeply and so convincingly that they give their 2-week notice and they've left jobs to actually join this fake company. So, like I said, it's very interesting how people are able to set up these fake companies and not get caught right away. But it's interesting after the fact when people have done investigations, the company's nowhere to be found.
Yeah. And it's so frustrating, isn't it? That a job seeker is going to see the job. It looks real. You think, oh my goodness, I've got a fish, right? I've got someone
Right?
interested. And then it evaporates.
Yes, it's the illusion of these ideal jobs, which really, in the career space, we say if it's too good to be true, it probably is, and you need to do the deep work. Unfortunately, a lot of job seekers make themselves vulnerable because they don't do the deep work. They just take it at face value, but it looks like LinkedIn, it looks like Microsoft, or it looks like whatever company, but what it looks like and not doing what you need to do to find out what the position is like, or even positioning takes some work. And unfortunately, only a small amount of job seekers overall are willing to do that.
Right. So how do job seekers identify the scam?
Great question. And I should preface this by saying that, in I said earlier in the past, usually it's a very vulnerable population where with the job fish, people who are job fished were actually high level performers, and they were in tech, and they were in engineering, and they were in the healthcare field, and they were job fairs because this thing looked so close to the real thing that the person made the company masquerading something so real that it's hard to tell from the outside. But if you're going to go deep, there are a couple of things you should do. And some of the things that we've talked about and you've talked about on your podcast ad nauseum, such as networking within a company, looking at a company page, checking out a company, even going as far as checking out to see if this company has a real incorporation or LLC or a real business entity of some sort. Then you should be looking at names and looking at names of employees to see if looking at going to their profile. Look at their photos. Some photos are fake. They're stock photos from wherever they come from. The avatars are not real. And even when you dig a little bit deeper and looking for employee pages, if everybody looks like a stock photo gallery, then you can be really suspicious and start asking more questions. You should research the person on LinkedIn to see if they have a real background that's somewhat verifiable. And if you have connections, see what those connections know about that company or about that person. You may have to do some work, but definitely you should be more concerned that, wow, this thing is really up my alley. How did I get a hold of this when I haven't heard from someone in a month? You should be skeptical always and be very discerning about who's contacting you and why. Some people have experienced it through their LinkedIn email. Other people have gotten email and random, and when they've gone in to check the emails, there's been misspelling, there's been misinformation, there's a wrong establishment dates of companies that are real. I mean, there's all kinds of things that have happened in the recent months. And actually, it's been happening about the past couple of years, but I think it's picking upward that this is happening more. But job seekers just need to be doing their due diligence and looking at what they can do. I wrote an article about job phishing. They can find on, it's called Job Phishing 10 Ways to Avoid a Scam. It's on lynda.com, and if you Google those, job phishing, 10 ways to avoid a scam, you should be able to find it. And there's a bunch of articles, and there's other references that I make as well within the article.
Excellent. Yes, very nice. And it just reminds me of when it sounds too good to be true, it is. And I'm seeing a lot right now for positions promoted as work from home or remote. That's where I'm seeing a huge amount of scams come up because everybody wants that. And they're just so obvious. No training needed, no skills required. That's not like that's just not a job, right? So when people are
Right.
when it sounds to be too good to be true, it is. When people are really looking for something and it's right on trend, that's often also a red flag. Yeah.
Yes. And I think, too, just to insert a little something, too, real companies have to be very discerning about what they put out there as far as a job description, because a lot of companies don't write job descriptions really well. And in fact, there have been reports, and I've even heard through my network, that people have gone to jobs thinking it was one thing because of the job description, but it ended up being something else. So that's a form of job phishing, too, though the company's intent isn't to get private data they're trying to hire, but they end up job fitting someone who feels like they're job fish because that description that they put out into the world isn't what the job actually is when they land the job and get in there and get started. So I think all of that is kind of a double warning. Is one, you should look at job descriptions for everybody, even if it's legit. But also, I think companies need to even stand out by writing relevant and true job descriptions to hire and to lure talent.
So we have a couple questions from the audience, and I'm going to hold off on those now, and we will bring them up later. One of the things that I read about, and we were talking about the salary disparities, and most of the majority of people that were responding to this particular survey, they were happy with their salary, they were happy with their raises. I mean, it was well over 50% that were happy with the money end, but they were very concerned about the economy. As a matter of fact, this was a CNBC All-American Workforce Survey just earlier this month, and I had seen it on TV and I found it online. And 83% of the people they surveyed that were employed were concerned about a recession coming up in the next 12 months. 74% were saying that they were afraid that their wages were just not going to keep pace with inflation. And then, just under 50% said they were worried about losing their job. And, there's so many articles about companies that are, downsizing. I read Microsoft and Lyft they have a hiring freeze, Wayfair and Twitter, also hiring freezes, Netflix and Stitch Fix, cutting positions. And so, the things that I've read seem to kind of justify the concerns that people have. And Mark, I wanted you to start us off because I know you are writing about this right now. And if you could start us off and share your thoughts on this.
Well, thank you. And I think big tech companies are actually copycat companies. They're very competitive and they copycat. One will say that they're going to do this, and there's a whole bunch of other tech companies that will follow just out of fear and concern. And at this particular point, there's I can't, again, giving career advice, you can't say don't pay attention to those companies when they are announcing publicly that they're having a hiring freeze and that was an ideal company. So I don't want to say that, but I do say that people really need to take a look at their industries and be tuned in to what's going on there, because that will tell you the story of what you'll need to do. If nobody, there are industries that are hot, and we talked about a splintered job market where one is hot and one is kind of on a pause and a slow grind to a halt almost, to where you have to really have some kind of intelligence. And that's where I've said over the past couple of years, you all know that I've said it ad nauseum, that job search is a lifestyle. So if you've already been, or you kept your network up, you've done some professional development, and all those things are related to your industry, then you won't have a problem navigating and hearing all these announcements. But on the outset, if you don't have enough information, you're hearing hiring freeze, then people freeze. They stifle and they wonder what they should do, when really all that intel is a lot deeper than just hearing a whole bunch of headlines. So I think that when you talk about the hiring freezes, that's where people need to be educated, and be educated well, and even for them to do all the work that we want them to do. And we've been saying it for years, but we always have those group of people who've been, with their head down and been working. All of a sudden they hit with all this information. But there are opportunities, even if people announce what a hiring freeze is. A company may say that we are a hiring freeze, but for these positions only. That doesn't mean they're not hiring at all. Right. And that's where people kind of jump off the train and say, oh, so-and-so's not hiring. That's not true. And you can casually get that information and be misinformed and be misled or down the line. Or that maybe there is a concern with the industry, like it was with 2020, where literally retail and hospitality, for the most part, for those jobs, they stopped cold and stopped hiring. But then they went into a deficit, so they went into desperation mode that we need people right now. So I think that's where, again, people just need to be connected and be informed and understand what is happening with their industry, with specific jobs that they're interested in, and just within their market, whether they should make a move at that particular time or not.
Yeah. I want to emphasize a point Mark made. There is hiring that happens at companies who announce downsizing. I mean, like, that's to me like one of the biggest things that people just go, but when those announcements are made, some people that are not being laid off get scared and leave. And then there's openings that need to be refilled. There's interim roles that need to be done to help transition, either divisions or products, or, from a place of either being, acquired by another company or sold off or wind down or anything to that effect. So a downsizing exercise creates other opportunity. And, I've even had clients interviewing as announcements are being made about freezes and downsizings. And, you just negotiate different security elements into the contracts. And this is, again, at even like a mid-level. It doesn't always have to be at the highest level, but, you put some either bonuses in place or guarantees in place, and as being the last person in, so you're not the first one out, or things like that. And there's still hiring that happens. Like, every opportunity that is talked about in the news generates an ethical opportunity, right? Now, whether it's right for you or not, or you have the right skills for it or not, is totally up for discussion. But every scenario garners opportunity. It's just a matter of how, when, where, and why.
I think when we look back at the last couple of years and those companies that were growing really fast, it was really in the tech sector and some specialty areas. They got big really quick, and they aren't necessarily confident in the economy moving forward, so they're going to shed or put a freeze on. So my advice always has been, absolutely agree with Mark and Lisa, even if a company is downsizing or they have a hiring freeze, that doesn't mean it's universal throughout the whole organization. There are pockets of places that might be hiring. But more importantly, I don't think everybody wants to work for a Fortune 100 company. Smaller companies have a much different environment. And so if you are seeing a lot of the Fortune 100 companies that you want to work for are having hiring freezes or laying off, look at the smaller companies that might be in that same industry, as long as that industry is sort of doing okay, healthy. But I think we saw this back in 2009, right, Lisa and Mark, that even when there were financial institutions that were laying off, not hiring, there were always a couple of people who were able to get in the door. So I think that for people that are afraid, this is what I also think. For all those people that say they're afraid they're going to lose their job, they're not going to do anything about it. The majority of them are going to hold on to their job until the pink slip arrives. So they're not going to do anything proactively. My guess is, because that's just what we have seen in the past. For those people that are unemployed right now and are still looking for work, I think you keep going full force like nothing is really different, because you will uncover wonderful opportunities with companies that are hiring. My concern for people who decide they want to leave one company for another company at this point in time is, if you're the last one hired, you're also more likely to be the first one let go if they're doing a downsizing. So unless you're in a really horrible situation and you can't stand it anymore, I would wait before making a move unless it's absolutely perfect for you, just because we don't know what's going to happen over the next 6 months.
Or if your salary is mid-level and not necessarily the top level, you coming in as the new person might allow them to have some cost savings with someone else who's more expensive internally.
That's
Again,
a really good point.
Heartless, right? But again, it's about working the angle you have, right? And if you are somewhat inexperienced and you need to get the experience, positioning yourself as somebody who has some experience that you can build upon, you might help them save some money and still get most of the skills, covered. So again, it's about how you position it and what problems can you solve for an organization.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
And I think, well, I was going to say that now that there's a little small movement of people who've worked in the tech industries are also taking advantage of the hybrid remote work, more the remote work aspect of it, with what's being called overemployment now. I don't know if you've seen the Reddit thread. It's quite long. But there's also if you look at, you'll see a bunch of people looking at it as a viable strategy to kind of mitigate all of the craziness that's going on, meaning that they're working at home remote and they have 2 computers, one for one company, one for another. They're not just overworking like in the past to make ends meet. They're overcompensating, in fact, and profiting for the fact that even if you're married, you and your wife both have 2 jobs that you're working, and that you have a life afterward because you're doing those from 9 to 5 in many cases. So those people have found a way to take advantage of the climate where they're getting paid these exorbitant salaries, and they're making the best of it, and people are paying off cars, paying off the college loans, and all of that. It's not a big movement right now, but there's a lot of talk surrounding it, being that people are using that to take advantage of the fact that, hey, here I could come right in the middle between not working in the office and not having to go in at all, and nobody will ever know. And people are doing this quite successfully. You can go on YouTube and see people actually talk about their experiences. Now, they don't always do it for a long period of time. They do it for just a short period of time. But when you think of the salary ranges that people are working under to do it for a short term, it's better than having to take that part-time job during Christmas to buy gifts. You can actually you can actually jump ahead and
Right.
and make your situation more viable. So if you want to start a business, you can go ahead and work both jobs for a year, and then maybe have a couple of years saved up to make your business work. So I think it's very interesting, and I think people will start to get more creative as the economy starts to make its twists and turns throughout the next couple of years.
I love that. And once you started talking about it, I realized that I had read about that. I see people talking about that on TikTok too. Here's what you can do,
Yeah.
from home while you're working your job. And, it's a whole lot better than, when I used to work at the magazine and then I have to run over to my restaurant job in the evening, to be able to just sort of
Yes.
navigate from home